Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about caffeine supplementation and how it kind of ties into athletic performance on the court with regards to basketball. Just some real quick facts about caffeine. Caffeine is among the most frequently used psychoactive substances in the world. So there's a couple places that we can find it. The first one, which I would highly recommend primarily, would be the natural sources. So coffee and cocoa beans, as well as tea leaves. Now, there are some other ways that we can find it as well. I'm sure we're all familiar with these ones, but it can be synthesized down and turned into energy drinks or energy gels, as well as powders, such as pre-workout. Now, speaking for myself, I do enjoy a cup of coffee to help me start my day, as well as ingesting some caffeine prior to an exercise bout. What I would recommend though is looking at a list of pros and cons, kind of seeing where it fits in before incorporating it into your supplementation if you haven't already. So looking at the pros list first. Caffeine has been shown to improve alertness, concentration, and arousal. And we can see that as it manifests itself first in the release of epinephrine, or as it's commonly known, adrenaline. We are all pretty familiar with that fight or flight response. So when you are getting ready for a game, or maybe even you're on the court and you have that sense of jitters, that's that feeling. It comes from our central nervous system, and it's there to help us be more alert, give us better concentration, and again, higher arousal. So your reaction time on the court's a lot better. Your speed on the court's a lot better. Your sense of your surroundings and where other players are around you is improved. All of that kind of ties into that increased athletic performance. It gives you a little bit of that edge. Another place that it can manifest itself is the release of beta endorphins. How we feel this as athletes would be more along the lines of after a workout, it's that workout high, that sense of wellness that we get. If we feel good, then we end up in a better mental state, we can perform better. So mental, just as physical, are important in sport performance. The last piece, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the pros, would be that caffeine has been shown to burn fat as well as sparing muscle glycogen. What does that mean exactly? So burning fat, caffeine promotes lipolysis, or the release of free fatty acids, as well as glycerol to be used as a fuel source. Now, if we're using those as fuel sources, that's where the sparing of muscle glycogen comes into play. The sparing of muscle glycogen gives us stores of readily accessible energy. That way, as we continue into practice, into strength training, into our game, we're pushing back against that fatigue because we have those readily available muscle stores. Now, looking at the negative side though, so this is important too, just because it'll help you guys make that decision on whether this is the right call or not. We talked about that fight or flight response. So one of the negative side effects, or I guess two, we'll look at the first and the last one because they kind of have to do with each other, would be elevated feelings of anxiety and increased heart rate. So again, tying it back into those pre-game jitters, if you know that you don't need to be, or you typically are too anxious prior to a game and you need to calm down, caffeine is only going to elevate those negative feelings. So with that being said, if we're taking caffeine, we want to try to limit the amount that we're taking in, or cut it out completely. Again, that's going to be something that you can play with, but I would suggest cutting back if you feel yourself getting anxious. Another piece would be sleep disturbances. Having too much caffeine in our diet it makes falling asleep that much more difficult, or achieving deep sleep that much more difficult. That's important because we need sleep to recover from all the lifting and all the running, all the practices and the games that we have. That's a lot of hard work that you guys are going through. We need to be able to sleep to recover. If we can't do that, then all of this stuff is going to be for naught. Looking at, we'll cover the banned substances here in a second, because I know you guys are wondering if this is awesome, then can I take it? We'll get into sports and dosages first. So if we're looking at purely endurance sports, should I be taking caffeine? The answer is yes. So on days where like we know we're gonna do a lot of running in practice, where we're really trying to push that aerobic or build that aerobic base, if you are taking caffeine, keep taking it. If not, we could talk about it too, and I'll cover doses in a little bit. But yes, we want to be able to, caffeine is great for endurance sports. It's been shown that in sports where it's just running or just biking, that those athletes that take it tend to be able to go a little bit longer, a little bit further than the athletes that aren't. When it comes to high intensity sports, so this is specifically talking about us in basketball, there's a lot of time where you're sitting on the bench and you're kind of recovering, and then you get back in the game and your heart rate is just jacked to the ceiling. You're going as hard as you can. And then you come down, you come sit back on the bench, and it goes up and it goes down during the entire course of that game. So this one is for us. The answer is yes here as well. Caffeine is good for you, but I'm gonna put a little asterisk next to it. This one, that little asterisk, it doesn't pertain so much to us. Caffeine has better effects in high intensity sports if the athlete is trained. If the athlete is untrained, the effects are pretty negligible. So for us, because we've been doing this for a while, I would say that high intensity sports or caffeine usage in high intensity sports is a go. It's good for us. Now looking at strength days or strength sports. So when we're focused more on lifting, if we have a lifting session that day, should I be taking caffeine? The jury on that is still out. There have been positive studies. There have been studies where it shows that caffeine intake is pretty negligible. Some of the positive studies, though, have shown that caffeine intake can affect larger muscle groups more than smaller muscle groups. So how that's good is it makes our bigger muscles that much more powerful. Kind of how that's bad is that our little stabilizer muscles, so if I'm looking at my legs, the muscles that make up part of my glute that help kind of stabilize the hips might not be as able to keep up with the growth that the larger muscles make up. So that's something that you're gonna have to weigh. Another positive side effect though of strength training is that it may increase muscular endurance if we're supplementing with caffeine. So what that means, it allows us to do more sets, more reps, build more muscle that way, and that would make sense. Again, muscle endurance if you're doing multiple reps at a time. Looking at purely endurance athletes who are doing these same movements over and over again for longer periods of time, they see success with supplementing with caffeine. So muscle endurance improving would also make sense. But again, if this is something where you're new to, you haven't taken caffeine yet, I'm gonna go over dosage here now. But again, I want you guys to make sure that you're doing this thing for you. So try it out at the lower end of this upcoming dosage. 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So taking your body weight in kilograms and multiplying it by about 3. That should be the dosage that if you aren't taking it, that's where you should start. We shouldn't go much over that 6 milligram per kilogram of body weight. The results there, you don't get much more of the positive, but you can definitely get more of the negative. What this looks like in total milligrams would be about 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine. So that's a pretty standard dose. That's a pretty high dose of caffeine. Again, I want you guys, if we're not doing it yet and you want to try, start towards this lower end. As you get more accustomed to it, as you get more used to the side effects, you'll be able to play with that number up or down. But again, starting on the safe end and then cautiously moving up. Again, if you feel any of these negative side effects, bump the caffeine back or cut it out entirely. Now, why we're all here? Because this is such an awesome, naturally occurring substance Is it banned by the NCAA? The answer is yes. Again, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to it, because these doses down here are okay to have in your system. So whenever you go and get tested for caffeine, what's gonna put you over this limit would be anything that's greater than 15 micrograms per milliliter. What that number comes out to equal to 500 milligrams of caffeine. 500 milligrams, roughly 6 to 8 cups of coffee, but that's going to result in a positive test. The NCAA deems that to be negative, so just make sure that if we're supplementing with caffeine, we are not going above that 400 milligram number. Again, staying closer to that 200 milligram number. If you guys have questions, come see me. Let me know. I'll be able to try to help walk you through supplementing with caffeine if you've never done it before. But with that being said, let's go get them.